Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. As you know, this is an event in collaboration with the Royal Economic Society, a Women Economics Network. So we have a full schedule today in which Claire Alexander will be giving the introductions in 1 second, and then we have a lovely set of speakers who will introduce themselves also very soon. Before we start, unfortunately, I have to read you some housekeeping announcements. Okay, so bear with me. So if the alarm does go off, please exit the building in an orderly way. Fire exits are clearly marked at the front and back of the room. In event of a fire, the meeting place is Wilton Street in the square between University Place and Kilburn Building. I'm very bad in directions, but if you leave University Place, to the right. Toilets on all floors. There are toilets with adaptations, including male and female, and you have the gender-neutral toilet facilities, which are located on floor 2. So that's it for the housekeeping announcements. So then, please, if we welcome Claire Alexander, who is the head of the School of Social Science, who will start with the introduction remarks. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, good, that's a good start then. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event. I'm Claire Alexander. I'm the head of the School of Social Sciences here in Manchester, which is, of course, where the Department of Economics is located. I'm not an economist. I should say that probably up front. I'm a sociologist. I do have an A-level in economics, but I got a D, so that's not inspiring at all, but I would just kind of confess there is life beyond economics, although Rachel tells me it's not too late to retrain, so I'm kind of hoping there's always a possibility. So it's a pleasure and privilege to welcome everyone today, and particularly the Women in Economics Network. I'm particularly pleased with the focus on inspiring women. We're very fortunate in Manchester to have been home to some truly inspirational women in economics, both in the past with people like Denise Osborne and Diane Coyle. We have some truly amazing women. Any of you that are in Manchester will know this already. But in the department today, so Rachel, of course, but also Ada Wassing, Tatiana Komarova, Sonia Krutikova, amongst our professoriate. And we have some amazing younger colleagues as well. So Sophia, Alessia, Agnes, Judith, Jasmine, some I think are probably here presenting today. Lakshmi and Caitlin, and they're paving the way for an exciting future. And it's really nice to see so many women in the room, young women. I'm not disrespecting the men, but it's really nice to see a lot of young women in the room today who are the future of economics. As one of only 2 women heads of school in the University of Manchester out of 9 schools, I'm acutely aware that universities have both made progress and have a lot to do in economics and outside. I do know that economics, unlike my own discipline of sociology, has particular challenges around gender equity. I was doing a bit of Googling, that the 2024 Royal Economic Society report on women in academic economics notes that at undergraduate level, about a third of students are women. It rises to 50% at PGT, but then declines again at PGR. I think the profile in Manchester pretty much follows that pattern as well. And this profile seems to have slightly kind of stabilized. So there is more to be done, I think. There is representation of, rising representation of women academics. So about 30%, falling to about 20% in senior roles. But I'm hoping that's a question of time and will resolve as things go on. As in other disciplines, including my own, there's an overrepresentation of women in teaching focus roles. So there are still kind of barriers and structures to be thought about. So work to be done. And hopefully by the people in this room and by all of you. And I hope that today will inspire you to connect with each other, to speak to the academics that are here today, and to, I think, most importantly, see yourself in these spaces, to think about the possibilities in the academy and beyond the academy. And I think actually from here, my position here and looking at the audience, I feel really very hopeful about the future. So I hope you enjoy today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. Now we will have some words from Almudena Sevilla, who is a professor in LSE and the chair of the UK Economics Network, and that will be followed by Maria Psyllou from the Royal Economic Society. Almudena will be joining online.
Thank you very much for having us here today. And sorry I can't be there. I'm about to travel to Bath to give a talk. So, but I just wanted to make sure that I spent, the 5 minutes to welcome you all to this event that we've put together as part of the Inspire initiative. And tell you a little bit about what we do and our starting, how we started. So we started UK WEN about 3 years ago, and it has been an absolute success. We've had a lot of demand from women. All our events, women economists, all our events have been oversubscribed, both online and in person. And I think it just on the one hand, it's amazing to see that we are able to cater to so many women economists. On the other hand, it's just a sign that there is still a lot to do. So what do we do at UK WEN? What is our mission? And our mission is pretty much to support the career of women economists by looking at the numbers and see how we're doing in terms of representation and other metrics, to provide support to women economists at all the stages, both junior and more senior, and also to provide visibility of women economists and their research or their work and their interests, because UK WEN spans the academic sector. So we welcome women economists across the different sectors in the economy. So we are very well positioned because we are based in London, and that's where the city of London is located. So we have a lot of women economists working in the private banking sector, in the financial services, across the government economic service, so public sector, as well as academia, tech companies, hiring a lot of economists these days. So it's a pretty broad coverage that we have. And how do we achieve our mission? So the way that UK WEN is structured is in 4 different main initiatives. One is network, the network initiative, and the flagship event or activity within this initiative is our annual networking event, which the first one was at the Bank of England. The second one was hosted by Nomura Private Bank. And this year it is April the 1st, and it's going to be at JP Morgan Asset Management. I think there is still the possibility to join in online, and I encourage you to do so if you can. It's going to be April the 1st. The second initiative is to support, or the support initiative, and this is targeted to junior women and to support women economists in their careers. We want to make sure that women continue as economists and do not drop out of the profession. So we hold career conversations events. The next one will be hosted by LSE together with the Royal Economic Society. So again, if you go on to our website, or better still, if you join us, if you join the mailing list or follow us on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, you will find about these career conversations events, which as an undergraduate student, I think you would also benefit a lot from. The third initiative is the Action Initiative. And here it's more about driving change as much as we can. One of the one of the main things that we do in this initiative is our expert panel series. The last one was organized with Vanguard in the city, and we talked about private pensions, particularly from a gender perspective. And apart from talking about economics and women in the economy, one of the goals of this panel series is to showcase the research and the work that women economists do. So we had women economists working for the Government Economic Service, women economists working at think tank. So there was a women economist from the IFS, and then a women economist working at Vanguard and dealing with pensions, and in particular, pension services for women. So we discussed about financial literacy, etc. So that is our third initiative, which brings me to the last initiative, or the one that I left for last, because this is where we are today. So our fourth initiative is the Inspire initiative, and the goal of this initiative is to inspire women like you. Women that are studying economics right now and that want to have a career in economics, and we want to make sure that that dream is fulfilled. So too many women drop out of the profession, and we want to make sure that that is not the case. So Maria Psyllou is the lead in this initiative, the one that has put together this event, and I hope that you find it useful. So thank you very much. That's all for me.
So hello everyone, thank you so much for being here today. So to introduce myself, I'm Maria Psyllou. I am a Senior Teaching Fellow in Economics and Public Policy at Imperial College London, and also the Inspire Lead at the UK Women in Economics Network and the Steering Group Member Committee in the UK WEN. So I wanted to just very briefly, I'm not going to take a lot of time. First of all, I want to thank my co-organizer, Sofia, and all the team here that they have done a great work and put together all the event. I want to thank also our speakers for giving their time today. They travel, and we appreciate this as UK WEN. We want to thank you for this. And I want to talk very briefly about the sorry. And I just wanted to briefly take you from Almudena to mention a few things about the Inspire initiative, and since this event falls under the Inspire initiative. So I've been the Inspire initiative lead for over a year and a half now, almost 2 years now. And the idea is that we want to encourage all the underrepresented groups, especially women that are studying economics at the university, to continue and pursue their career in economics. And as Claire mentioned, we have the underrepresentation of women in economics profession, and we are trying to inspire and encourage many of you to go out there and continue your career in economics. And that's why we have our speakers today, to showcase you the diverse career paths that you can have in this economics profession, from private sector, public sector, and academia. So, and just to showcase some events we have done the last 2 academic years. We have done a lot of events in many universities, since this is an initiative where we travel to the university that they want to put together the events and host the events. And we're very happy that we are here today. Lastly, before I give the floor to our speakers, I wanted to mention that you can, our UK Women in Economics Network is open to everyone, not just women and not just economists. It's open to everyone who want to advocate and support women in economics. So you can go to our website, and there is a mailing list. You can join us for free and find out about the events. And as Almudena mentioned, we have the annual networking event next week on the 1st of April. And there are places online if you are still interested to attend. And we sometimes see students in the events around, and it's very good for networking, meeting people from the industry that will be useful for your future career. And you can also follow us on social media. And just to give now to finalize a few words, this is our schedule for today. And I just want to thank our speakers, Sindy Foster for Avaero Capital Partners, Lucy Bex for National Institute for Health and Care, Elizabeth Martin-Dahle from Oxford Economics, and Rachel Griffith from the University of Manchester. So I'm going to open the floor to our speakers. And first, I will start with Sindy Foster. Thank you so much.
It's easier if I use this, I think. So thank you all for coming this afternoon. I know there's plenty of other things you could be doing for your time, so we appreciate you coming here. So my name is Sindy Foster. I'm the Principal Managing Partner of Avaero Capital Partners. We are an aviation consultancy providing advisory for aviation and aerospace businesses, specifically in emerging markets, Africa, South America, and the Caribbean. We primarily work with anybody that is setting up an airline or has an airline or has a service which is being provided to the airline or different parts of the aviation industry. So that's a very potted summary. So we are very niche in what we do, but because of that, I want to use this talk to talk a bit more generally about how I ended up here, because it wasn't deliberate, and it wasn't linear, and it was primarily in many ways accidental. So let me go back to the very beginning. My talk on the schedule is inner city to global business. So that gives you a bit of a clue. So I was never meant to be doing what I do. Nobody that I knew when I was growing up did anything like what I do. I had no role models to do what I do. I had no reason to do what I do. So, and it wasn't even an intention of mine. So going back to when I was younger, a child, I've got sort of 3 siblings, and I was the sort of middle-ish child, number 3. And I wanted to be a fashion designer. I was very creative. I was into fashion and, you know, quite girly in what I wanted to do. So I did my O-levels and then did very well. And on the very first day of my A-levels, I looked at the timetable and I had no lessons. But my best friend, she was going to an economics class. So I just decided to tag along because I had literally nothing else to do, and my school wouldn't allow us to like leave the school grounds because you didn't have a lesson. So I went and I never left. I changed my complete career direction in terms of what I wanted to do very accidentally. And I went to Sussex University, where I studied economics in the School of Social Sciences. And it opened up a completely different world for me in terms of asking questions. I was always a child who was asking questions, and economics has given me a framework with which not only to ask questions, but to find the answers to those questions. So I found that it resonated very easily, with me. But I graduated at a time when the economy was really poor. We had a recession and there literally weren't jobs for graduates. And so I had to do something else. And so I ended up working in legal finance for about 10 years. But one of the things which I realized much later, I was using my economic education and training literally everywhere I found myself. So we had a software issue at one point in Chambers where it was calculating a formula incorrectly. My mind went back to, how do I break down the formula of what this computer is doing incorrectly? So my algebra now came into practice. I never thought I was ever going to use it ever again. There I was using it. That was one example. But one of the things which I realize about success is that success isn't linear, and you don't always have to know where you're going. But what you must do is, you've got to have a plan or a strategy, whatever you want to call it. You need to have a way of executing what it is that you want to do. So if you identify something that you want to do, you need to now find the tools to be able to do it, regardless of where you end up. the other thing that you need is you need a bit of luck along the way, because accidental things will direct you if you recognize the opportunity that that accident presents to you. And luck has happened several times in my career, and it's been able to recognize the opportunity that has led me to where I am today. But it's, you know, wanting to do something, like I wanted to do something which was I don't want to say more than what people were doing, but different to what everybody else was doing. I didn't know quite how, but along the way, I figured out I could gain some experience, gain some knowledge, practice the tools that I'd learned as an undergraduate, add extra level of understanding in terms of industry, knowledge and expertise, and then actually do something. So that's where the action comes in. So I look at success as strategy, luck, and action. So it's no good just to have an idea. You need to have a bit of luck along the way, and you need to have a plan to implement and, you know, execute whatever it is that you're doing. So my lucky break when it came to coming back to my core area of expertise happened because I went to a concert. It sounds pretty random, but it's exactly what happened. After sort of many years of just working in private sector, doing business advisory and consultancy, I met someone who had an aviation business, and they didn't really know what they were doing in terms of aviation. I didn't know what they were needing to do in terms of aviation. So I used my knowledge and expertise to analyze the aviation market in the UK. To begin with. And so we were able to help them devise a business strategy to help them, penetrate the UK business aviation market in the UK. And they did that very well. They expanded into Africa, which was another lucky break, which I'll come back to shortly. So here I was with an aviation client. Another thing is, say yes to things that you don't know whether you can do, because if you have got a brain that is trainable, you'll be able to find a way to do those things. So here I was with this aviation client who was focused on the UK. That aviation client led us to oil and gas clients. Oil and gas clients led us to mining clients and so many other industrial clients. And I was quite happily doing this work with these successful businesses, because we didn't work with startups, for many years, but I felt unfulfilled because I'd always wanted to have a business that gave me the opportunity for global travel. So an oil and gas client decided that they wanted to send me to various countries. So I would be in Dubai, I'd be in Geneva, I'd be in New York, I'd be doing all sorts of stuff. And but where the pivot point came for me was I was sent to Nigeria. And when I got to Nigeria, a lot of the businesses that I interacted with, the aviation businesses that I interacted with, they were 15 years behind the clients that we had in the UK, Europe, and America. And so I kept, for several years, I just kept telling them, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Where's the data? Where's this? Why don't you change the policies? Why don't you do X, Y, Z? And then I realized I'm wasting my time and my energy telling people to do things that they've got no intention or interest in doing. So I decided to found a company that filled those gaps in terms of using expertise from the Western aviation countries. So I've got partners who are operating in Saudi, Dubai, Canada, America, as well as UK. And we're using our expertise to guide the African aviation private sector businesses in terms of optimization of their business models, data collection, analysis, even down to creating surveys for the industry. Because what I realized is that getting data from Africa is one thing, getting accurate data from Africa is something completely different. And most of the time, they don't even realize that the data isn't accurate. And so we basically had to unpick what was happening and put in place a foundation, and then educate, it sounds really bad, but we literally had to educate the market. And I ended up on the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which is a policy group that presents policy ideas to the Nigerian government. Around about the same time, I can't remember which one happened first, I was invited onto the Aviation Policy and Strategy Group, which is a group with all the heads of the aviation agencies. So an agency is something like the Civil Aviation Authority, Ministry of Aviation, the sort of airport authority, the people that do the air traffic control, who are called NAMA. So we got all the heads of businesses. So it gave me like a captive audience to redirect them in terms of policy, as well as implementation of some of the actions that were not aligned with their growth objective. And that's all of that is because of my economics background. And so it's been a very interesting career. I've been doing lots of different, practices, trying to think, I don't want to get too technical into the aviation field, but if you are looking for a career, if you're looking for a expertise that gives you access to global business and governments, economics is definitely an entry point for that. So I think that the lesson that perhaps I'd like you to take from what I have said is that you don't have to wait for opportunities to be presented to you. You can create them for yourself if you recognize there is an opportunity for you. So I think there's going to be questions at the end. I don't want to go over the time. Oh, I've still got a few. Okay. I thought that was the second, right? Okay. So let me talk a little bit about what I do then. So as the principal managing partner, my goal really is to drive the strategy of the business. I work with the owners of airline businesses to optimize their businesses, utilizing modeling that we've created for our business ourselves. And we also provide advisory to, I can't sort of mention names, but there are groups of airlines who work together. And so we provide consultancy and advisory for some of these organizations, as well as doing a lot of media, presentation in terms of TV, radio, and conferences. There's a lot of technical aspects that I'm involved in on a day-to-day basis. I no longer have to analyze the business plans. I have people that do that. But what I enjoy doing is looking at what is going on in the world and working out how is that going to affect the aviation sector. And then I will write a sort of a commentary on that, which is often published. And so it's a daily learning, education, experience, translating the real world situation into something that's going to resonate with the bottom line of businesses. So that's what I spend my time doing. And I find every day is different, and I never know where I'm going to be from one month to the next. So in January, February, I was traveling for 30 days. I was I think I started off in Dublin. And from Dublin, I went to Lagos. From Lagos, I went to Berlin. And then it's just been trying to deal with the challenge of handling the client requests and inquiries. And so I found economics to be the driver for a lot of the professional success that I've had. It's created opportunities where I've had fun. It's created opportunities where I've been able to travel. And I deliberately chose to work in male-dominated sectors. And I haven't felt it's been as much of a challenge as people may feel, because what people recognize is your knowledge and your ability. And I'm one of the few consultants, aviation consultants in Africa. And it's, it makes you memorable. And so I was talking to somebody recently who said that if there wasn't a woman employed in the business prior to their entry, they would not join. I hope no one here feels the same way, because someone has to open the door, and that someone might as well be you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Lucy Beggs. I'm a health economist at the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. That's nice. And today I'm here to talk about careers in health economics and giving a perspective on working in the public sector, specifically as a woman. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal career path and give an overview of health economics and about health economics in the public sector and at NICE. And then I'll talk a bit about my experience working in the public sector as a woman. So my experience, just a brief overview. So I started out doing a joint honours degree in philosophy and economics at the University of Bristol. And when I graduated, I got a job as a research assistant at the University of York in a health economics consultancy group. I hadn't heard of health economics before that. So that was my introduction to health economics. I took a bit of a break and a detour, and I did a master's in epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of Leeds. And after that, I got my first role as an analyst at NICE. I've been there quite a while now, and I progressed from being an analyst to a senior analyst and to an advisor. And my current role is that I'm a health economics advisor in the central health economics function at NICE. So that's kind of an overview of my history. And I'll also give a little background on what health economics is. I'm not sure if there's anybody here who's studying health economics or has an awareness, but I've put on a definition here. So it's the study or analysis of the cost of using and distributing healthcare resources is one definition of it. And examples include evaluating the health system or policies from an economic perspective, evaluating the cost effectiveness of medical technologies and interventions. And by that, I mean, it could be drugs or devices, different ways services are organized, or different surgical techniques. There's lots of different types of interventions. It can also be the analysis of demand and supply of healthcare and health system resources planning organization and evaluating health system performance. So my role at NICE really focuses on the first two on that list. And I'm using the acronym NICE a lot. So it stands for the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. It's a public sector, non-departmental public body. So we sit under the Department of Health and Social Care. Originally, we used to be part of the NHS. We're now independent from the NHS, but our role is to support the NHS. And the key function of NICE is to produce guidance for healthcare professionals in the NHS, making recommendations on best practice. And crucially, that guidance has to be based on the best available evidence. And the recommendations are made by independent committees of experts. So the experts might be senior doctors, academics, commissioners. They sometimes include economists, and they're supported by multidisciplinary teams within NICE. And one of the key functions of the guidance is to ensure that the recommendations represent value for money for the taxpayer. So it's not just about looking at the clinical evidence, it's also about stewarding the NHS's resources and making sure that the things that are provided on the NHS have good kind of bang for their buck. So I've obviously talked a lot there about health and healthcare professionals. So you might have a question about why NICE and the public sector employ economists. So I'm sure you'll all be aware that the NHS has a fixed budget and scarce resources. And as economists, you'll be aware of the concept of opportunity cost. So every healthcare intervention that the NHS spends money on has an opportunity cost, and that's something that money that could be spent elsewhere in the NHS. But in terms of healthcare, the opportunity cost isn't just financial. So there's an opportunity cost in terms of people's lives, in terms of patients' well-being and survival if you're choosing between treatments. So as an example, if you imagine that we've got a choice between whether to recommend a new drug or whether to recommend continued use of current practice, the new drug might be exciting, highly anticipated. It might have had a lot of promotion from its manufacturers. It might have a lot of media attention and be anticipated by clinicians and patients. But actually, you have to dig down into the research and look at the cost of the intervention over a long period of time, and also the effectiveness of the intervention. And if, you know, imagine we look at that and we see that actually long term it's going to cost more than current practice and it's not as effective as current practice. Making the right choice in that decision and in the recommendation we make for clinicians might mean that more patients survive, that they survive with a better quality of life, and also that there'd be more money to be spent on other important things in the NHS, such as ambulances, nurses, incubators, etc. So that's kind of an overview of why it's important for the NHS and healthcare to employ economists. And just to expand on the role of economics at NICE, so I mentioned that NICE produces guidelines. So this is one that I've picked out on early and locally advanced breast cancer, on the diagnosis and management. And within that guideline, there's a recommendation for clinicians to offer breast reconstruction to people after they've had a mastectomy for breast cancer. So that's the kind of headline recommendation for clinicians. But if you kind of look within the guidance, buried a bit deeper in, there's a section on the rationale for that recommendation, and it talks about how there may be cost of savings associated with immediate reconstructions because fewer surgical procedures are needed. And that's because reconstruction is done at the same time as mastectomy. And so there's lower rates of additional surgeries required. So this won't have been kind of plucked out of the blue. There will probably have been a team of economists looking at the evidence base, perhaps generating their own economic models to assess the cost effectiveness of this breast reconstruction surgery. So what we've got is a guideline that's produced by NICE, made up of recommendations, and those recommendations are informed by economics. In terms of the role, so one of the key things that we do is build economic models to assess cost effectiveness of healthcare interventions. And we also have to look at clinical evidence to assess whether the interventions, you know, drugs, surgery, etc., whether they actually work. Because we're not just looking at cost and it's not just kind of accounting, we are looking at cost effectiveness. And you need to be able to critically appraise economic and medical literature. You know, we don't just Google and find, you know, a publication to support things. We, you know, do literature reviews and assess the full body of evidence to assess for bias and make different strengths of recommendation and account for uncertainty. Another key part of the job is the ability to communicate complicated ideas to non-economists in an accessible way. So as I mentioned, our committees who make the recommendations are often clinicians. There might be communicating to patients, lay people. We have lay members on our committees, and you might have a lot of complicated evidence that you need to kind of synthesize down to some key points that can help people make decisions. And also something that I really enjoy is we work at developing new methodologies. There's a big research component in the role. We work closely with academics because medicine and medical evidence is always evolving, so the economics needs to kind of keep up with that. And so that's a really interesting part of the role. And in terms of skills, knowledge, experience, how you kind of get to work in health economics, I think typically it's desirable to have a postgraduate qualification, although not essential. Normally people have some experience with decision analytic modeling. That's the type of economics models that we use, and exposure to the software that we use for modeling. So it's mostly done in Excel, but increasingly we're seeing models built in R. Because we're in a healthcare setting, you have to have a working knowledge of medical research methodology. And as I mentioned, the ability to communicate complicated information to a lay audience. I would say that if anybody was interested in pursuing a career in health economics, then a health economics MSc is a good way to kind of get exposure to all those different areas. But obviously people, you know, don't really wake up when they're 10 years old wanting to be health economists. Everyone's come from different backgrounds. And there's opportunity to get lots of exposure from on-the-job learning and self-learning. And some jobs pay for postgraduate qualifications. So I don't think it's running this year, but I know NICE has has previously had a training graduate program where they fund health economics masters. So I'll just pivot now to kind of working in the public sector, starting kind of more generally. One of the kind of great things about working in the public sector is that you're typically using your skills as an economist for the benefit of others, rather than just for profit. So in terms of health economics, if you make the right decision, then you can actually be improving people's lives, prolonging people's lives. And I think that, that kind of is true more broadly for other roles, economics roles in the public sector. And that can be really motivating on a grey Monday morning in January when you don't really want to get out of bed, knowing that what you're doing is helping people rather than just lining someone else's pockets is really motivating and can be very rewarding. Another advantage of working in the public sector is that there's relatively decent job stability and benefits. So things like sick leave, maternity pay, pensions, the amount of annual leave you get off in a year. And I mean, this one might seem quite dry, but there's well-established management structures and HR frameworks, which, doesn't sound thrilling, but actually those things can be really helpful when you're working and trying to navigate the working world and issues you come across. Another advantage of working in the public sector is transparency and pay structure. So the kind of path ahead of you, and there's no sort of awkward negotiating salaries or bonuses. And also that kind of helps with equality because you're aware that people with the same level of experience and qualifications who are in the same grade as you are being remunerated the same way that you are. In my experience, health economists are paid very well as a profession in the public sector. So I'm involved in recruitment, and we're on NHS banding scales, pay scales. And when you look at the equivalent clinical roles, they're really quite senior. So being an economist in the NHS it's really valued. And another advantage of the public sector is that it's unionized. And again, that can be really helpful when you're navigating some of the challenges of working life. And then focusing specifically on working in the public sector as a woman, I do think the public sector is a really great place to work, especially as a woman. So I don't know if people are aware of the Equality Act of 2010, but in that it specifies that the public sector has a duty to eliminate discrimination, but not just that, but to advance the equality of opportunity, and so promote equality. And I think that kind of comes through at a corporate level in terms of the working culture and the tone that's set. So at a corporate level, the public sector normally has structures and policies that can kind of help with issues that are predominantly or perhaps disproportionately faced by women. So a good example is parent policies, but also at my work, there's kind of a menopause policy, fertility policies, and whistleblowing policies. And I think those can all be really advantageous for women, giving women a good experience in the workplace. Another thing is that my experience is that the public sector is quite amenable to flexible working patterns, especially as economists doing desk jobs. It's a bit different if you're doing frontline work. So for example, I have kids and I work part-time. But before I had children, I worked compressed hours so that I could have a day off every fortnight. And there's always been that flexibility. I mentioned the advancement of equality of opportunity. So at NICE, we've got staff networks, and they're a little bit like this kind of women economics network. They're really great resources to kind of network with other women. They arrange training, events. There's just a general sense of kind of allyship. And they're also helpful in putting forward issues that are affecting women in the workplace on a corporate level. Another advantage of working in the public sector as a woman is enhanced maternity pay, and also there's mandatory equality and diversity training for all staff. Obviously, everybody who works there is an individual with their own views, but I think as a culture, the public sector is a nice environment to work in as a woman and supportive. So that's my experience of it. So that kind of concludes my section. It's just a brief overview of health economics and the public sector, but I look forward to answering any questions you might have at the Q&A session. Thank you.
So hi everyone, my name's Liz, and my kind of talk today, what I really want to try and get across is just a positive message on how you can get from being here as a student to whatever kind of economics or other job that you will have at some point. I have built my career up to now in economic consultancy, and I just wanted to give you a bit of an insight as to what it's like to work in economic consultancy and the private sector in general. So I will introduce myself and my career journey. I'm going to give you throughout just some advice from what I've learned, and I want to give you some takeaways from what it's like to work in the private sector. I'm going to spend a few minutes on my current job now, but I won't have enough time to go into specifics of what I do. I do have a slide in there, so I think they're going to give copies of the slides if you want to have a look, but also happy to answer any questions at the networking session after. And then I'm just going to give a few brief words on gender and diversity in economics, like all the other speakers have done. So contact details if anyone wants to get in touch afterwards. But yeah, my experience, so for information, I am 28, so I graduated about 6 or 7 years ago. But I was once in this room really, really unsure of what I was going to do because first I did A-levels and I absolutely hated them. I struggled so much, and at that point thought, well, what kind of job am I going to be able to get with this kind of experience? I then decided to continue doing economics, did my bachelor's at MMU, so down the road. And it took me a few years after graduating to realise that I really did want to do economics. Between my master's and bachelor's, I actually went into the financial consulting. So I worked for Avaero, just in the kind of finance department. And then I was a consultant at KPMG. Both of these experiences were in Luxembourg because I had this huge passion to be able to speak French and I wanted to work in French. So that's why I went there. I then decided finance is not for me. I want to go back to economics. So I did my master's at the University of Manchester, but with the GDI school, so doing development economics. After that, I was approached again by MMU to maybe consider doing a PhD. And to decide on that, I got the experience to lecture and tutor for 6 months at the university. I actually worked with some of you guys. And I decided PhD was not for me because I saw the workload. So that was me. And that landed me at my current job, which I've been in for 3 years, as an economic consultant or economist for Oxford Economics. And what I kind of wanted to say from this whole experience, like the last 3 things at the bottom, is all of this serious stuff is very important, but it's also really important to live and enjoy your life and explore whatever passion you have. Don't be afraid to do something that maybe your parents, like my mum and dad, did not understand why I wanted to speak French. They didn't understand the choices I was making. I did it anyway, and absolutely no regrets. So if you have a little niggle, my advice is follow it because you'll always have that niggle. So yeah. I also wanted to say that the job, education, very important, but your interests and what you can display differently from other people, I think is really important as well. So when you're doing your courses, you have reading lists, things like that. I would really advise you to actually read as many things as possible because there could be something there that sparks your interest and that takes you forward into the jobs that you're doing. So over my kind of time at uni and working, gender economics, economics of institutions, health economics, although definitely not as much as what you've done, and economics of trust all came up. I continue to read things about them, and it's allowed me to sort of stand out in interviews, come up with dissertation topics very, very easily because I already had interests, and eventually apply it at work. I appreciate at the start of your career, sometimes we have all these dreams to be able to do exactly what we want to do. You have to work to get to work exactly where you want to be. So at first, it may not be your full job, but it could just be one little part of it. And at my company, have been able to write, little research briefings and blogs about the topics that I really care about. So I just think that's really important. And so what is it like working as an economic consultant, or what actually is an economist? Because I don't know about you guys, but I remember sitting here and thinking, okay, I only have three choices. That's academia, public sector, or finance. And all three of them didn't really float my boat, but maybe that was just me not researching enough. But there is a whole other thing, economic consultancy. And, you know, I think sometimes hearing the word economist can be quite daunting, and you think, oh, maybe like I'm not good enough to be one of those. Well, I tell you that you are. You know, economist is basically what you're doing already. You're studying the relationship between society's resources, what it produces, looking at people's behavior, using your research and analysis skills to sort of evaluate policies, make decisions for governments, make decisions for businesses. And as an economist in the private sector or as an economic consultant, you do all of that. The main difference, apart from the public sector, is you're doing that for a business. About 95% of what we do is for businesses. Sometimes we do things for universities, government, whatever. It's mainly for businesses. And I think that mindset can be quite strange when you've, you know, been at university just reading academic papers for a long time. The client is the priority. And at the end of the day, if you're in the private sector, you're working for a profit-making company. So you have to do all of your kind of, you know, scrutinized analysis, but whilst thinking about the end result, which is how is the client going to interpret it? Are they going to understand your methodology? Are they going to understand how you communicate it? So I think that's really the key of economic consultancy. And there's lots of employers out there. None of these I'd heard of when I was at university, apart from Big Four, of course, but really we've got smaller consultancies, Oxford Economics, and then I've got a list there. There's, you know, financial market services like Moody's Analytics, S&P Global, management consultancies like McKinsey, and of course the Big Four. They all have economics departments in the UK, from what I'm aware. And I think there's also a lot of myths to consultancy, which I hope I can break a little bit in this slide. So I've heard, you know, lots of things like you just work long hours, it's very stressful, there's lots of pressure, the clients are really difficult. I experienced all of that in the financial consultancy. I have experienced none of it in economic consultancy. I don't know if that's something to do with who I work for now, but being a consultant does not mean you have to give your whole life to it at all. Actually, I found it a really, really interesting career. You know, consultancy is project-based, so every project is completely different. You get the opportunity to work across the whole project, so from the research, the data analysis, the writing, the presenting. So it makes your day very diverse and interesting. Of course, you also are working with a lot of different people with different specialities and different sectors. So you're going to learn a lot of different things from kind of specialists in each area. And being in the private sector, in a consultancy, it's really important to keep on top of what is like hot, what is current in the market, you know, environmental economics, social economics, that kind of stuff, and constantly developing like your products, your tech, AI. So it's kind of very, very fast paced in terms of always trying to think of like, what could you do better, which has been very fun. And so where am I now? So I'm working for a company called Oxford Economics. We are the largest economic consultancy in the world. We were founded in 1981 in Oxford by some Oxford graduates. And now we are over 600 staff, 20 offices worldwide, and the most economists that you will see in a private sector company in one place. And we have some very, very fun parties where we all get together. We just went to Miami in January, so it's really fun. And the company is basically split in two. So we have our subscription work and our consultancy work. Our subscription, think about things like you go to the World Bank data bank, you find all your data. We have our own data bank and we forecast all the variables in that data bank up to 2050 for all the countries around the world. That's one side of it. Our other side is consultancy, and that's where you're working directly with the client to answer whatever kind of question they want answered. Some kind of key examples, economic impact analysis. We do quite a lot for universities where it's basically saying, well, what does this company contribute to the economy? How many jobs does it support? Tax, GDP, does it employ women? Lots of questions. Like I said, data banks and forecasting. We also have a scenario service, so that's looking at what kind of key things are happening in the global economy, like Trump, tariffs. We have a service that will be like, if Trump adds another 10% to China tariffs, what's going to happen to whatever you want to know. We do kind of very, very granular forecasts, so city levels, regional levels, industry levels. We write a lot about them. And we also write more specific kind of research topics, like I mentioned before. This is a slide on my work, which I do not have time to talk about, but I'm in the cities team. I forecast kind of city level data for India, New Zealand, Singapore, and Vietnam at the moment. But this is an example of where it's really key to be on top of trends. Megacities is this new concept that we're having to kind of get up to speed with and start forecasting. So happy to answer any questions in the next session. And I just wanted to say that I feel like people have this kind of question in their head of, is it possible to have this dream job, or at least a job that's going to make you happy? And I just want to tell you that it actually is possible. I feel that now, and it took me a while to feel that. It took me 3 or 4 jobs. The first job is definitely, well, it might be the one, but it probably won't be. And it's really about you finding what are your priorities and finding a company that ticks them. Mine is flexible working, working with friendly people, having a good social culture, being able to try different work across teams. Like I moved teams, and that was very, very easy. And being able to work internationally too. It is possible to find what you're looking for. And not to talk about this now, but we do have graduate and placement schemes at the company if anyone wanted to ask questions about that later. And the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about was gender, diversity, and economics. And obviously it is a little bit of an elephant in the room. It's a problem, and it can't really be ignored. It's at university level, it's at the whole sector level, it's in private companies especially. And I just wanted to say from my experience, like it can take quite a strong mindset to stand in a room with people that don't look like you and get your points across and feel like you're doing as good of a job as them. Every single team that I've been in, I've been either the only woman or one of 2. You know, it's been pretty challenging, especially when you've just graduated and you're 21. You're like, oh. But I think the key is don't be discouraged. And like Sindy said, use it to your advantage. Diversity, there's so many studies that diversity is good for business outcomes. It gives more ideas, more skills, people can communicate better, people can relate to each other better. And so it's not just about technical skills, it's about your soft skills and being able to talk to people and relate to people. And if you can do that, you can use that to your advantage. And I think kind of being someone that stands out like that can help. And if this is kind of a topic that you're worried about, you think about, I just wanted to give some advice of what you can do. And I think this is for everyone. Obviously, this is themed on gender, but guys in the room too, anybody. If you get to a company and you're feeling a little bit worried, identify who are your allies. You've got managers, you've got mentors, you've also got colleagues at your level. Have conversations with them, see if they're feeling the same as you, get some advice. There are a lot of allies out there, is what I've learned. Get involved in societies, so like the Women in Economics Network, well, you can sign up for the mailing list, join the events, but at Oxford Economics as well, we actually formed our own network. We call it the Oxford Economics Women Plus Network, and that's a group of colleagues, female colleagues, who have come together to try to improve diversity, uplift our female colleagues in the company, but also outside as well, which I'm happy to talk about later too. And like I said before, about keeping up your economic interests, contribute to gender economic research, take opportunities that you have at work. Like I wrote a blog about kind of COVID recovery and how the policies should be kind of gender focused. Maybe think about doing a dissertation topic on it, and keep reading books, keep yourself informed as to what's happening. I've put a link to this book called Invisible Women, which I don't know if everyone's heard of it, but it's like a gender economics Bible. I would recommend anybody to read it. It's really, really great. And don't be afraid to kind of constructively challenge your company or education institution or government or whatever. Things do need to change, and they are changing for sure. And I think question answer is for later. But yeah, I just want people to get the message that like you can stay positive and you can get what you want after your degree. I'm sure it'll be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much. What a great set of talks. So I'm Rachel Griffith. I'm a professor here at Manchester, and I think I've taught quite a few of you. So one of the things that I think people find surprising when they hear what economists work on is that it's not all banking and finance. When you talk to young people, including sort of first-year economists at university, the thing they think economists do is work in banking and finance. So if you look at labor market data, so statistics on where everyone works in the economy, and you look at everyone who has an economics degree, what you see is that people who have economics degrees, about a quarter of them work in the public sector, around a quarter work in consultancies, including media consultancies, and the other half work in the private sector and charities. And of that half that work in the public sector, it's less than 20% work in banking, finance, and insurance. The others work in private sector companies, like aviation companies, like pharmaceutical companies, all sorts of, pretty much all companies have some economists to help them decide how to price their goods, how to do various other things. So economists work in a whole ton of places that are not just banking and finance and not even just the public sector, which we hear about a lot. So I'm a professor here, but actually I've spent a lot of my career working in charities. And so I thought to provide a slightly different perspective, I'd talk more about that work than academia. So the percentage of economists that actually work in academia or education is like more like 5%. It's a pretty small employer in aggregate. So as I said, I've spent a lot of my career working in charities of different types. So for example, right now I spend half my time at Manchester and half my time at the Institute for Fiscal Studies in London, which is an educational charity. So I'll come back to talk more about that in a second. So what I want to do is, as everyone else has done, just provide the potted history of my career and how I got into being an economist and working in charities. So I was American. I grew up in America. I hated school. I quit school when I was 16 and worked as a waitress and volunteered for a charity that was trying to show that banks in America were doing what's called redlining. They were drawing on a map, they were drawing red lines around areas where the majority of people that lived there were African-American, and they were charging higher rates for mortgages basically in those areas. So it was like a form of discrimination in the financial market. And the charity I was working for was trying to provide evidence for that because there were some new laws that you could challenge banks not to do that. So I was volunteering, had quit school, didn't have a ton of skills, except my ambition and desire to do things that were good in the world. And so I got involved in that project and just kind of helped out, but I was really kind of disappointed in myself that I didn't have a better set of skills to help prove what that charity wanted to prove. And that was one of the things that really inspired me to go back to university, that and realizing that I didn't want to be a waitress for the rest of my life. So I went back to university, got a degree. I won in joint economics and international relations, but I really liked the economics part a lot. Came to the UK, actually went to Sussex for a year abroad, and just fell in love with economics and have worked as an economist since then. I did my undergraduate degree, and then I actually went and worked for another charity that was working on ethical investment portfolios, so thinking about how people can think about both wanting to make money through investments. We all do that in our pensions, etc. But to do that in a way that was kind of in line with some ethics they had, maybe about wanting to improve the environment or not increase inequality or whatever. And so I was working in a small charity that was trying to help people with some aspects of wanting to do that. And again, I found that really interesting, but I found that my mathematical skills, my technical data skills weren't up to what I really wanted to do in that charity. So I went and did a master's in the evenings in econometrics to try and learn how to use data better and use econometrics methods to try and provide more rigorous support for people wanting to do that. And in the course of doing that, I got quite interested in a broader range of things. And then I went and worked at the Institute for Fiscal Studies 35 years ago, and basically have been involved there ever since. And what the IFS does is it's an educational charity that really tries to bring economic research into the public arena to try and help people make better decisions. That could be people being policymakers, so to give policymakers information, so a bit like an economic consultancy, but it's done rather than waiting for the public sector or a charity to ask, rather than working for them. IFS has a large group of economists who work there who decide basically what they think people should know, I'll put it that way, and try and convince them about what the useful pieces of information there are, and put those informations out in the public arena so that if policymakers are making decisions, it's not only the policymakers that have the information on which they're basing those decisions, but the general population does too, so they can decide how to vote. The charities do too, so they can decide how to lobby. So sort of kind of even the playing field in terms of the kind of technical information that people have available to them. So that involves both skills in producing that technical information and manipulating data, but also, very importantly, as the speaker said, communicating that to people in ways that help them understand what can be quite numerically intense and complicated kind of ideas. Okay, so the point of telling that story was what lessons would I draw if I was you from that story? One is you can really spectacularly fail and pick yourself back up and still succeed quite spectacularly later on in your life. So I have repeatedly failed. I failed at school. I've not gotten jobs. I've not gotten papers published, all sorts of things. All of those, that doesn't define your career or who you are. It's how you deal with those things, right? So take that as an opportunity, recover, and go do something else. Everyone fails lots. Anyone who's successful will tell you all of the times that they failed. It's a good thing to fail. It means you're trying hard and doing exciting things. What is not a good thing is if you let it drive you down. So that's the first thing I take away from it. But the second thing I take away from what I just said and what all the other speakers have said is that really an economics degree is basically giving you a set of tools and like a way of thinking about the world that is useful in a ton of different situations. It's useful for companies trying to make a profit. It's useful for governments and public sector people trying to help people in society. It's good for charities, useful for charities who are trying to achieve aims of equality or solving, environmental issues, etc. So the tools that you have as an economist can be useful in all sorts of places and in ways that we haven't even thought about yet. And so it's really just thinking of it not as I have to go be an economist, but it's like, what do you want to achieve in the world, and how can you use your skills as an economist to help do that? I think it really takes you a lot of places. I guess I'll end by saying something. So I've been an economist for quite a long time. I've pretty much been most of my career been one of the few women in the room. Like Sindy said, I also think that that's often been an advantage, and that I am more unusual and have more memorable than a lot of other people in the room. I think you can try and turn it to an advantage. Like failure, you can turn into a good thing. I think you can, if you're unusual, you can turn it into an advantage. That doesn't mean that I don't want to try and work to make sure that there's more women in economics. But not only women, actually, if you ask me, one of the bigger problems in the UK is that the only schools that really teach economics now are fee-paying schools. And so that a lot of people who come into economics are from rather wealthier backgrounds. And so the proportion of people coming into economics from working class backgrounds is much less than from higher income backgrounds. And I think that's quite problematic if you think about who's making decisions in the public sector, for example. So I think there's all sorts of ways that diversity it would be desirable to have more diversity in economics. But I don't think that anyone should see that as a barrier to becoming an economist. There's all sorts of ways into becoming an economist, and I really don't think those things should stand in your way. So I'm going to stop there because I think we've heard quite a lot, and I think it would be quite nice to have time for discussion and comments. So thanks very much.
So thank you very much to all the speakers that were like fantastic talks, very insightful. So we are gonna have like a Q&A session. So if anyone wants to ask a question, let us know.
Hi, my name's Harry. Bit of an off-point question, I guess, but do you know of any opportunities for economists, maybe in the military or stuff like that, or the government as well, I guess?
Opportunities in the military.
It's a great question. I don't know for a fact. I'm sure they do, yeah.
Yeah. There'll definitely be opportunities, actually, both public and private sector. Ministry of Defence certainly must have economists, and businesses who are supplying to the Ministry of Defence, like big defence companies, Boeing, people like that, definitely they would have economists. You need to have economists in any business which is directly contributing to GDP. So.
Hi, I want to ask a question that, do you think, have we done too much or required too much for quantitative analysis in economic research? Like I turned to my tutorial and professor in the university, and I say, can I participate in any project, any research about the economic? And they say, as an undergraduate student, you can only join if you have excellent data analysis, sort of like high-level Python skills, things. But we don't think, personally, I don't think we need a very excellent data analysis skill to observe the trend of a country's development or sort of things. I don't know. How about your opinion?
To answer. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I would say, I mean, things are definitely changing. The requirement for coding skills and to be able to use AI is definitely becoming a benefit to businesses. But we're still using Excel. So if there's people in the room that are stressing about being able to use R, I was there too. You don't need to stress. Don't worry. Use what you can use. And I completely agree that when you get into business world, it's about communicating your analysis, not about doing the most advanced analysis, because at the end of the day, there isn't the data for it. So I completely agree. You have to have both qualitative and quantitative skills.
She said, can she get an economics job if she has a degree in management?
I would say in health economics, definitely. There's a lot of, as I said, it's quite niche. You know, lots of people come to it from different backgrounds. So, for example, I work with a lot of people who've done, for example, medicine or pharmacy. You know, completely diverse things that are different to economics. They may have then, you know, taken a sideways move to get that exposure, or done additional training, whether it's self-training or say a PG cert or something like that. Or it might have just been, you know, getting the right job that's given them a bit of exposure and they've been able to kind of build on that. But it's certainly, you know, I work in a team full of economists and lots of them won't have economics undergraduates. It might even be the minority who would have that. And management is so kind of allied to economics anyway. So in my experience working as an economist, I wouldn't think that would hold you back.
We have two questions here. So
can you tell me a little about the graduate schemes that you offer? And thank you. And some perks that international students can,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give more detail in the networking session after, but we do recruit 20 grads, 15 placements every year. I think this year the time has gone, but essentially the graduate scheme is a rotational scheme. So it's 2 years. You start as an assistant economist, you rotate through 4 different teams, you learn 4 completely different areas of economics, and at the end you become an economist. the question on international students is a common one. I understand your frustration. I work with my company on kind of like, graduate recruitment, and the answer is the places are limited. So I think your best chance of getting something is always to apply like the day the application starts, because at least for us, we review applications on a rolling basis. And I think a lot of companies do still do that. So that would be my advice.
I just want to understand your perspective, since right now we are all studying economics and we're studying a lot of econometric models and economics models, which is a bit difficult for us to understand. So I just want to understand, have you faced any challenges in the beginning of your early career stay, when you were starting your economics career regarding the same? So yeah.
I think I'm the wrong person to answer this, since I'm an econometrist.
Yeah,
repeat the question?
as a current economics student, we're studying a lot of econometric models, economics models in our courses. So just want to understand your perspective. Have you faced any challenges in your early career days, to cope up with all this, when you're starting your economics careers?
I think it's about, because they see a lot of like econometrics and things from a very theoretical perspective, whether this was a challenge for you in your undergraduate years, and then it is very different in the labor market. That's the question.
Yeah, I was equally confused looking at all these models when I was at uni, so don't worry. And I would kind of say similar answers to before, that when you get to work in a business environment, there's even less kind of data available. The models, obviously when you're in an econometrics class, you've got to adhere to all these incredibly strict rules, but in the real world, it's not possible to always do that. So you have to simplify it somehow. The models that we use now, I'd say, are much more simple than what I learned at university, but that's just my experience. You guys might have a different experience.
Yeah, so I was going to say I'm older than, shouldn't be talking about age, but when I graduated, we barely had computers. And so a lot of it was manual. And I remember going into one business, I think it was about 2004, and they had just computerized, but the model that they were using wasn't accurate. And because I was able to manually calculate the inputs, I was able to show them how they were sort of charging 25% less than what they should have been charging. And so over-reliance on software is dangerous. An understanding of what you are trying to achieve and the inputs that you need, I think is important, because there's an over-reliance, I think, on data which is churned out and not enough analysis of that data. So when I started in the African market, whichever country I'm dealing with, my first thing is looking for the data. But if the data doesn't make sense, I'm someone that will now try and work out where is the problem with this data, how do we fix the problem with that data. So I think knowing what you're trying to achieve and what inputs you need, I think is half the battle.
Can I just add to that hopefully your econometrics course is teaching you that. I know when I taught econometrics, and I know the people who teach it now, that is the main emphasis. I mean, you do have to do some proofs, but the main emphasis is on understanding why you're doing something and why the method you're using is aiming to achieve that. The point of that, of teaching you that and testing you on it, is not so much that you need to do that in your later life, but you need to be able to read papers by other people that do that and be able to understand, are they doing a good job of it? Should I believe them or not? Or are they doing a bad job of it? There are also some economics jobs where that's incredibly important. So if you work, for example, for the competition authorities and in competition consultancies, they will use a lot of fancy econometrics. And some of the other regulators, the electricity regulator or something. But there are many jobs in economics where you do it on a spreadsheet and you've got very few data points. So there's the whole range. And it depends on what you like and what you're good at.
Just encourage people to take the opportunity to be proactive, do self-learning. It might be that you're not required to work on a project, but volunteer for it, have a look in the models, see if you can work out what's going on. And actually, there's a lot you can learn and teach yourself. You know, in Excel, open the bonnet, look at the Visual Basic. That's something, you know, there's so many resources out there online. You can kind of equip yourself and go quite far. And really, I don't know, I think that when you're kind of managing people or recruiting, that the ability to actually do the code and have you know, work it in practice stands for more than the qualification. So or just as much at least. So you know, there's a lot you can do on your own, kind of self-learning.
Oh yeah, hi. My question is more towards the moral or ethical side of working as an economist. So, well, as I understand, an economist's goal is to increase profit and to drive GDP up. But take the case of in health economics, right? When there's new technology that would possibly, on the contrary, reduce GDP by saying, you know, you have the new technology and that that drives people, certain specialists out of their work because, I don't know, maybe robots or machines could do a better job. Isn't that a bit of a, I don't know, an ironic thing? And have you ever experienced something like that where, you know, something seems like, oh, it may be beneficial for society, but actually economically it's not?
So I'd just like to start by pushing back and saying that I think your definition of what economics does is not correct. I mean, what economics does is help people understand how to make choices with limited resources. So it's about thinking about limited resources, financial resources, time resources, resources in the economy, like, you know, natural resources. All of those things are limited. And we have to take decisions over how we allocate those across different things. That's what economics is informative about, right? That's not about necessarily making profits. I mean, many economists work in the public sector, which is not at all about necessarily increasing GDP. It's about trying to trade off our desire for inequality and to protect the most vulnerable in society with our desire to have an efficient economy. So I think that typification of what economics is really not at all what economics is about. There are some economists who, you know, whose job is to work in a firm and to try and help that firm decide what the profit maximizing price is. That's a problem that economists are good at solving, but that's not, you know, that firm may have other objectives in mind too, long-term sustainability, etc. So I think that's not an accurate description of what an economist does. Anyone wants to add to that?
We're talking. I was actually shocked that was the definition of economics and where that came from. It's always been about the efficient allocation of resources, reducing waste, you know, improving efficiency, opportunity costs. These are like the foundations of economics. And yes, GDP is a profitability, you know, calculation. It's a financial calculation. It's a productivity calculation. But that's not the only thing that economists are targeting. There are many other things, even in aviation, where the margins are tiny. If all economists were targeting profitability, you'd have no economists in the aviation industry where the margins are between 2 and 5% profitability. There's a limit to what you can do, but it's about the efficient utilization of aircraft assets. It's the efficient allocation of capital. It's about the people within the businesses as well. And so it's much more than just a financial objective.
Yeah. My question is how to consider about the separate between the economic theory and model and with the real life. For example, I think we can predict what will happen after the COVID-19, and in fact that different governments apply different public policies, so it will cause different results. So how to consider about that?
That's an interesting question. I can answer it from the perspective of the aviation industry in Africa, because we actually did a survey during the pandemic in terms of what the outcomes were likely to be, and we accurately predicted what the outcomes were going to be for Africa, which were pretty dire because they didn't understand how supply chain even was going to impact them. They didn't understand how the oil prices was going to affect them, inflation and devaluation of currencies and things like that. So understanding how real world economics has an impact on at the sort of sector level is very important. And different countries got it wrong, different companies got it wrong. Boeing got it spectacularly wrong. Heathrow got it spectacularly wrong. British Airways got it spectacularly wrong. There are many people that got it spectacularly wrong because the assumptions were wrong in the first place. So I think it's a question of, and that's, I think, where we as a consultancy have an advantage, because we've got, well, I particularly have got a background of many industrial sectors, and so the interlinkage between them gave us an advantage in terms of what our predictions were going to be. If that answers your question.
I didn't appreciate as an undergraduate was how important or how key the kind of conceptualization, parameterization of uncertainty is when you're building economic models, but also just thinking as an economist. So COVID-19, it was an people say 1 in a century event, but whether that's, so, when you're building models and things, taking into account how likely are shock events like that to happen, that's all, and that's where a lot of businesses, and governments made errors in how likely they thought things like that were to happen. But I think that also, that's part of the interesting thing about being an economist is conceptualizing uncertainty and taking that into account. But, you do see the real world consequences play out when people, or when things happen that you can't control everything. You can put in the most likely, most plausible parameters and the parameters you have the most certainty about in a model, but ultimately in real life, the data might not represent what's actually going to happen, and unpredictable.
Okay, so I just want to ask, what advice you have for people who might want to work for charity or like non-for-profit organizations? And also I want to ask, so what other book do you recommend on gender economics? Because I'm already reading Invisible Woman.
Yeah. So there's a generic piece of advice, which is study hard and do well in your degree. That's always going to get you far. But don't worry if you don't. You can fail and then go back. So if you're interested in working for a charity, go and work for a charity. There's many charities. Just go apply, volunteer, get to know people in the charity, get any kind of job. I think this is kind of true for anything, any kind of career you want. It's much better to try some jobs, discover you don't like them, and then try and then get into a different job. Applying for a job from a job is much easier than applying for not a job. And so I think that just going out and experiencing the world. So if you can't get a job in the charity you want, for example, my nephew just did this. He works in urban planning, and he really wants to save historic buildings. He went and worked for a private sector charity, a firm that did exactly the opposite to that. It was trying to build new buildings and tear down old ones, because it was useful for him to learn how they worked, so that when he got the job that he did want, he kind of knew how the other side worked, if you like. So that wasn't a waste of time for him. So kind of going out and getting any kind of job, I think, helps you understand something about the way the labor market works, the way work is, and learn something about that, from which you can then discover what's the job you really want. I think you said you went through several jobs that you didn't like to discover the one you like. The only way you can know that is by getting jobs, and they may not be what you want, but then that's what you learn.
gender economics books, I'm actually going to recommend some very old books or papers because I think it's really important to also read what was written in the 1980s versus what's written now. I did my master's in development economics, so I was particularly interested in the differences between the theories of Western versus developing countries. So one person that I thought wrote some interesting stuff, and it's very, very old school, Gary Becker's household model, I think is like a key place to start in understanding how kind of like gender and labor and the household connect. And then there's another economist called Esther Boserup who wrote about how women, basically like the cycle of women and labor and how that's changed because of developing, how a country develops from kind of like agriculture to manufacturing to services. I would start there, and then I think you will find a lot more.
Can I just add to that last one? Claudia Goldin, who just won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago, writes exactly about that, about the role of women in work and how that's changed over many centuries.
So my question, I think, is maybe because I think for a lot of us, we don't really realize all of the different aspects we can go into after an economics degree. As you said, a lot of it is like banking and finance, and then we're not really sure what else there is. And it's been really interesting to learn the different parts of economics that people can go into. So I wondered if each of you could maybe speak a little bit about what you love the most about your career, or why you think someone should go into your path, because you've all done slightly different things.
The center of the table. My career choice, I think I've enjoyed it the most because I'm passionate about the industry, and it is an interesting niche to enter. And so for me, I think if you're going to get involved in aviation or airline economics or aerospace economics, you've got to have a passion for the sector. You've got to have an interest. Otherwise, you're probably not going to enjoy it. It's quite slow moving in terms of technology adoption. It's usually behind many other sectors because there's a lot of legacy technology involved. There's a lot of inexperienced people launching airlines, and they don't necessarily understand the need for economists. There isn't a single airline economist in Nigeria, but there are 15 domestic airlines in Nigeria who are all suffering. Probably there's a correlation between the lack of airline economists and the productivity of the airlines. So for me, I think to go into the airline industry is you've got to have an interest in it in the first place. And if you don't, I think there are other sectors that you're probably better off going into. Maybe general consultancy might be better if you don't have that passion for that single sector.
So for health economics, I really love my job. I think I kind of mentioned in my presentation, but I love the fact that it's a form of economics where you can really help people. We actually get patients testify about the impact the drugs that we might be recommending has had. You can see the impacts. Often we make it into the news. It's quite regular that we see our teams work in the news. One time it was quite surreal. We were in the lunchroom and BBC News was on in the background. It was when Theresa May was Prime Minister. And we realized she was talking in the comments about a piece of work that one of my colleagues was working on. So you have such a big impact on people's lives. So I really love that. And then another thing I like about health economics is that in medicine, there's this real concept of evidence-based medicine. So obviously with clinical research, the level of the rigor of the research, it's a really high bar. And working in that domain as an economist, there's a full environment where it's very academic, very research oriented, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector or doing consultancy. All the economists in health economics are doing actual frontline research, and that culture of rigor is really encouraged regardless of which sector you're private or public. In health economics, so it's kind of a fun environment if you like kind of academic research, but you want you don't want to work in academia, and it's an environment where your work really does make a difference. So yeah, I love that.
I would say, so this answer is probably quite specific to the company that I'm working at now because it's a general economic consultancy. So we have lots of different teams that do lots of different things. And that is what I like the best, is because I was someone who wasn't exactly great at like one thing. I wasn't like the best at econometrics or the best at writing essays, but I was like pretty good at all of it. And so being a consultant, it allows you to do lots of different things, work in lots of different sectors, work in lots of different locations. You kind of like have to know like 75% of everything going on, which is what I like.
And in sharp contrast to that, I would say, as I do research in both charity and in the academic sector, and what I like about that is I get to decide what I do. That comes with big risk, because if I do something stupid, then I waste my time and I get nothing for it. But it means I get to spend years thinking about the same problem in great depth and become the expert on that thing, and I get to know every little thing about it. And I like that. So, you know, you have to decide what it is you like. So it's like, that's great, but it comes at a big risk, because if you pick the wrong thing and you spend 5 years working on it, that's 5 years down the tube. So you've got to be good at picking the right thing.
So we have one last question.
Sorry, I have a stupid question. Like, I think if I want to pursue economics in the future, so I need to do some internship now to gain experience. But when I first apply summer internships, some of the companies required the experience of internships. So it's really confuses me. And as part of my classmates, they may have companies from their family can provide the opportunities, but my family can't provide it. So how can I do?
So I get students ask me that a lot. So I think you just need to do anything. It doesn't need to be economics. So if you can get some kind of paid internship anywhere, just get a job, do something interesting, but volunteer somewhere. The more interesting and different it is, the better. It really doesn't have to be economics, but, you know, go volunteer for a charity, go, you know, run a marathon, I don't know, whatever, do something, but do something interesting that you like, that will kind of just make you stand out from other people. And if, you know, that isn't the thing that you most want because you've applied for that and you don't get that, just do something else though. And the more you do, once you do one or two, then you'll find that there's more opportunities open up to you. But the key thing is to do something.
Nowadays, I think you've got a lot more opportunities to create something for yourself. So if you look at YouTube, you look at TikTok, there are economists, you know, putting out content. There are blogs putting out content. If you create a demand for your perspective and the, you know, what is particular and special about you, then you can use that when you apply for your internships for, you know, a more of a regular type of internship. But sitting there and saying, oh, you know, there isn't an opportunity, no one has sort of given me an internship, and so therefore I've done nothing, isn't a solution, because there are other people in the same place who are opening doors for themselves.
A practical thing for internship and job applications. So I mean, I'm talking from a public sector perspective, but I do quite a lot of recruitments and a lot of panels. I see a lot of applications. A key thing I would say is to evidence the claims that you're making about yourself. And, you know, so you are probably all getting experience. So for example, university societies, you might have joined those to do a new hobby or do something fun, but see if you can take the things that you've learned through that, perhaps you've been a treasurer or a president of a society or something, and look at the job descriptions and the person specifications for the things that you're interested in, and then map the skills that you have to those things and write it in your application. So, you know, in the NHS, for example, when I'm doing recruitment, you know, I look at the job description and I look at people's personal statements, people, you know, and I see, can they evidence each thing, and they'll get a little tick for each of those. And then when it comes to interviews as well, just familiarize yourself with STAR method of answering competency questions. And it's all about, you know, using the experience you have. It's all going to be unique to each individual, but using your experiences and proving to the employer that you've got something relevant to bring to the table. So yeah, just try and think of what you've got and evidence, use that as evidence of why.
Well, before we have the concluding remarks, could we give them another round of applause for the... And now for the concluding remarks, we have Professor Ralph Becker from the Department of Economics.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, everyone. You perhaps can understand I was quite reluctant to accept Sophia's request to give concluding remarks. I guess you can see why. So I really didn't quite know what I would have to add to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize what you said. So I'm going to do what in good lectures, if we get time. Hopefully it's not going to be mansplaining. And summarize, not explain. Okay. Let's see, you be the judge of that. So you may wonder today on the day where Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, went in front of Parliament to give not a real budget, but some sort of mini budget. Do we need events like this, actually? And let me use one of the concepts you raised. I think it was Lucy, I can't quite remember. Concept of opportunity cost to explain why, here we go, to explain actually why you are here. We have 4 excellent, busy economists here. We have others who organize this event. They're not spending their time, which is a big cost, to come here and talk to you for nothing, because they see that there's still something to do. And Liz, you called it the elephant in the room, the underrepresentation of females in the profession. So clearly there is something to contribute through events like this, through your time. You can do something. Now, do our guests here think that they are the agents of change, the agents, the people who will make the change happen? I suspect not. They think you are. Okay, they have done their job. They have done, they're hopefully continuing, many of you for many years. But the important thing here is about what you do in future years. So you have to think about yourself as the agents of change. But in some sense, when I listened to what you all said, none of you had like this big aim. I'm here to, you know, improve the position of women in the profession. You are all following your own wind, right? You were trying to be happy for yourself with your profession. So this is how you become agents of change, okay? That you follow your own interest, your own passion. That's what you have to do. So how do you go about this? So I was trying to extract the advice you gave. And Sindy, you said, you used, I think, 3 words: plan, action, and luck. So briefly say what I think you said about these 3 things. Firstly, plan. Now, the plan is, the first thing of your plan, I think, is you have to find your passion. And all of our guests here explained today, they're following their passion. Now, they didn't necessarily have it at the stage you are, right? Because it's hard work to find your passion. And what does that mean? That hard work is, you know, you need to read, listen, talk, and that's not easy. And nobody has woken up on a Monday morning knowing what their passion is. So you have to work hard on that. And when you do that, you can identify the gaps in skills, perhaps, as you have, as Rachel has described. As Rachel has described, you have to find it. And then once you have them, then you have to show some action. All right. Some of you have done their masters because they realized what they wanted to do. Either Lucy, you in biostatistics, Rachel did then another master's after you realized that your econometrics was not up to scratch. Thanks, by the way, for the defense of econometrics earlier. And so that, you know, you identify your passion and then you action. Now, lastly, what does luck have to do with it? And Sindy, you said you need luck, right? And you, how do you, you know, what can you do about luck? Well, you have to go out. And again, several examples where you explained that. Sindy, you said you went to a concert. Actually, before that, you followed your best friend into a lecture because you didn't know anything to do. So the point is, you don't know in advance where the luck will come. You just have to, you know, go out, put yourself in situations perhaps that feel uncomfortable, talk to people you don't know, go and do jobs which perhaps you're not quite sure you like, or you will take anything out of it. If you just do it, you will be able to extract what you want out of it. What you will learn something from that, and we heard many examples of that. So try and fail, and then learn. So I hope you feel that was a more or less accurate extraction of what you wanted to say, what you did say. So that is really my part. All I'm left with is to ask you and join me in thanking everyone who contributed to this, of course, our 4 speakers, Sophia and Maria. Thank you very much for organizing. I know there are also, not quite sure whether I've seen Naomi earlier, people from the university who have helped contribute to this event. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to you for coming.